on the right with I can't even think of politically irrelevant far-right movements. Like the Tea Party got people elected. They had the Freedom Caucus. They were disruptive. They were doing things in the House to actually fuck with votes and shit. Like the Freedom Caucus was a real thing and they were doing stuff. These are the people that you negotiate with. You don't negotiate with or capitulate to or make concessions to people that have no political power. Because if they have no political power, what that means is there's nobody in the country that actually supports them in a political manner. Just people on YouTube.
And their businesses. And
yeah, nobody on the right is making concessions to never Trumpers because the never Trumpers have no political power. They're gone. They're gone immediately. Kicked out of the party and gone forever. Nobody even knows anything about them.
Or the economy of toxic uncertainty. And that is people don't even know how to plan their businesses. And the U.S. S&P trades at a price earnings multiple of around 26, meaning for every dollar of profits that our great American companies generate, the world rewards us with $26 in value, which flows right into not only the pockets of shareholders, but employees. It lowers interest rates. We can borrow money at a much lower rate. The U.S. dollar is kind of the reserve currency because everybody wants to buy American stocks. So,
wait, what?
Just with $26 in value, which flows for every dollar of profits that our great American companies generate. The world rewards us with $26 in value, which flows right into not only the pockets of shareholders, but employees. It lowers interest rates. We can borrow money at a much lower rate. The U.S. dollar is kind of the reserve currency because everybody wants to buy American stocks. So there's greater demand for dollars.
Oh. You're saying greater EPS and everything is helping American employees. I would say not really, but I guess in a very, very, very roundabout way. It helps everybody, I guess. But I don't think Scott's dumb enough to do like weird trickle down shit. So I'm assuming that's probably what it meant.
And the U.S. being the reserve currency globally literally lowers on average the interest rate that you pay across your student loans, your mortgages, and your car loans somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. So that's just literally hundreds of billions of dollars in cost savings that the Americans enjoy because of the fact that our markets trade at a higher multiple.
What is a caucus? I'm going to be honest, since I got for real into politics, I haven't actually studied or looked up caucuses or whatever. I'm going to give you what I think they are, but maybe I'm totally wrong. I think a caucus is basically just a collection of people that are all in a chamber of government, so in the House or the Senate. I think they're generally in the House, right? Are there caucuses in the Senate? There must be. But it's like a group of 10, 20 people or whatever, or some number of people who are like, hey, we all tend to vote together on these issues. That'll be like a caucus. So like there's a progressive caucus in the House, but it's not like super ultra uber progressive. It's like just like I think far left social people, but not, there's like it's a ton of people in that caucus, right? Or there used to be like the Congressional Black Caucus or the Tea Party, or the Freedom Caucus was a caucus. It's just like a group of people. The Gang of Eight could maybe arguably was a small caucus, I think. It's just a group of people who are all like, hey, we should we all vote together on like certain issues. I think basically informal, like an informal agreement to do it, kind of. I think.
Literally hundreds of billions of dollars in.
They get allotted resources if they are officially recognized. What do you mean by that? Allotted resources? I don't know what that means.
Just in your car loans, somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. So that's just literally hundreds of billions of dollars in cost savings that the Americans enjoy because of the fact that our markets trade at a higher multiple on earnings. Now, why do they trade at a higher multiple? A lot of reasons. We're more risk aggressive. Our technology is better. We have more
staff and researchers.
Zeitgeist or culture of entrepreneurship. We have great universities, great intellectual property. But we also have rule of law and consistency. We're seen as good trading partners. We're seen as people you can count on. We're seen as a place where there isn't going to be a ton of corruption where you come and say, open a bunch of restaurants, and then the government shows up one day and says, sorry, we now own them. And that happens in other countries around the world. Rule of law and consistency have been thrown out the window in just 110 days. And you're starting to see a reduction in the price earnings multiple. And I believe over the next several years, we're going to see a re-rating down of our price earnings multiple, which effectively increases the costs on all American businesses and consumers. Because, and the market has sort of said this to a certain extent, the market has said, we don't really know what this guy's going to do and we don't trust him. 145% tariff. I mean, this is what a bad negotiator is. The first thing we need to do is dispel the myth that this guy's a good business person. He would be wealthier if he'd taken his massive inheritance and invested it in index funds. His business career includes a trail of bankruptcies and unpaid subcontractors. He is an outstanding, to be fair, he's an outstanding reality talk show host, made several $100 million hosting and envisioning a reality talk show. As a business person, he's not very good. And in terms of negotiating, he's negotiating himself at this point. He put on 145% tariff, and then a few days later, without any counter from the Chinese, other than this is unacceptable and we're not even going to talk, he said they're unsustainable. It's like, well, boss, you're the one that did it. So to go to 145 and then to go down to 30, and effectively what you have is the Chinese are divesting away. This will keep the factories sort of humming in China. This will basically loosen up or cancel the trade embargo for the time being. But also in negotiation, you have to understand your leverage and the amount of leverage you have. And what is typical of America and Donald Trump, we're under the...
Dean is scared of destiny. Listen, if Dean wants to chat publicly about anything, I'm okay to do it. I don't, like I said this before, obviously my community had a very harsh response, probably somewhat informed by my coverage or whatever, which is fair. But listen, I'm not here to scream or shout or tear anybody down. Okay. I just feel like there are better ways that they can handle and deal with dealing with pushback. It's a whole ass conversation.
get the impression we're much more powerful than we are. People think of us as, we're the only customer at the taco stand here, and that without us, they go out of business. We're the third largest trading partner. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the EU are bigger trading partners with China. China has been divesting away from us, and this is I think this is good for them. They get to continue to sell not as many products, but still not the shock that this trade embargo was going to implement on them. At the same time, they will slowly but surely continue to divest away from us. And that is what the whole world is doing, Tim. The whole world is rerouting their supply chain around the United States, not even because of tariffs, but because they don't know how to plan their business with us, because of this toxic uncertainty. And I think that resupplying or that rerouting of the supply chain will take years, if not decades, to reheal. And I do think the Americans have taken for granted, the American public, of just how inexpensive our goods are because of the supply chain that runs through the U.S. of every major economy, because they trust us and think there's rule of law. And those things are no longer a given with us. The scariest stat I've seen, organization did a poll of global citizens, took a statistically significant sampling. And for the first time in history, more people around the world think that China is a greater force for good in the world than the U.S., which says to me people are much more inclined to do business with China than they are with the U.S. And as someone who has run businesses, I've run businesses my whole life. They've always been global businesses because they've been strategy and brand firms. When I walk in to meet with LVMH or Samsung, Tata Motors, we're taken seriously. And also, when they do business with us, they want to do business with us. If I'd started a brand strategy firm in Pakistan or even in Thailand, they're just less inclined to do business with you because they don't know you, they don't trust you as much, they don't think you're as innovative, they probably don't think your employees are as good, they're not as confident you're going to uphold your side of a legal contract. The legal contracts aren't as easily, agreed to because they're not as consistent with the kind of American or Western law. Yeah. All of that we have had massive benefit from, and I don't think American consumers realize how much they benefited from that, and they're going to realize it when everything just gets a little bit more difficult. Your thoughts?
I agree with most of that. I'll just defer to your expertise on the economy side of things, so I concur with it. I just like putting on my former Republican hat, just on like the China hawk side of it. So I remember we used to have kind of a Republican Party that was strong against communism, and that felt like wanted to use more of a Reaganite policy, toward in great power struggles. Like we've seen these guys.
Dean did not have a better Jubilee performance in Destiny. Really, it's really hard to compare our Jubilee performances, just because. I'm not saying that one did like better or worse, but just because mine was so fucking unhinged. I don't know if that's normal. I feel like mine had an ungodly amount of like bizarro personal attacks. It was a lot of kind of wacky shit, I would say, but whatever.
Basically fold in the face of China. And I just think broadly, more geopolitically, think about the advantages China has gained over the past 5 months. I mean, in addition to the stuff you just laid out, the fact that we totally gutted USAID and we've eliminated any soft power we have throughout the world and created a huge opportunity for China to fill that void. Nice. To your point on the economic trading partner side of things, I think that if you are one of those Asian countries like Thailand that you just mentioned, like, I mean, don't you feel like you can trust China a little bit more as a trading partner than you could have 5 months ago? For sure. Then you look at the policy side of things, talk about leverage and weakness. I mean, we completely fold on the Liberation Day tariffs. Meanwhile, we also completely fold when it comes to TikTok, right? And like the U.S. government puts into law a TikTok ban, but Donald Trump and this administration won't enforce it because they're afraid of the backlash.
Nah, well, kind of. I think that what happened was Trump saw, I mean, I don't have to guess because Trump just literally blatantly said it. Trump saw that he had way more support on TikTok than he initially thought he would. And then because of that, he ends up keeping TikTok. That's it. It's as simple as that.
From the American population. So like China's been so successful in infiltrating American culture through TikTok that and the power of that is so great that like the U.S. government is scared. Let's just be honest, scared to like enforce its own laws when it comes to banning TikTok. China State TV this morning, I saw this. They put this out. The outcome of trade talks with Trump team shows China's firm countermeasures and resolute stance have been highly effective. China gets nearly all tariffs off for doing very little other than agreeing to talk. That's their spin this morning. So I just think across every metric, we have made China stronger over the past 5 months in ways that, as you say, are going to be hard to unravel. Yep. And there isn't really any evidence that we are trying to like win a great power struggle with them. And I guess I'd add just the last thing I'd say on it is, if you're China, it's hard for me to get inside the head of Xi Jinping, and I don't know what their plans are with regards to Taiwan or their timing, but I just do not think they could look at.
It's like having Trump is like a stupid Hitler. It's, you know what? You know who Trump is? It's like this.
Oh, you blind bloody fool!
You can't insult me!
We've had vicious kings, and we've had idiot kings, but I don't know if we've ever been cursed with a vicious idiot.
You can't!
A vicious idiot. He's not even smart.
At America right now and think that we would put up any real resistance to their efforts to overtake Taiwan if they want.
Okay, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I will say this one more time, I guess. And by one more time, I mean probably a million times. So gamer girl feet in DGG chat says, Drellin, well, I'm not saying you're ignorant, my friend. I'm simply voicing my view on punching left. When the majority of people who lean left are not the cringy caricatures that the right and people like Destiny try to paint. Like one of my favorites is Roland Martin. I've never in my entire life said, and I don't believe that anybody who's listening to me gets the impression that I've said that everybody who leans left or everybody who's further left than me is cringy. I'm like very obviously and very explicitly talking about the crazy left-leaning people or leftists on like TikTok and shit who are literally anti-electoral politics. I think everybody understands that when I say that. I've said that a billion times. I literally said I think AOC is like a shining star in the Democratic Party, probably one of my favorite Democratic politicians right now. I'm pretty sure she's significantly to the left of me on a lot of things.
Right now, and think that we would put up any real resistance to their efforts to overtake Taiwan if they wanted to do it, based on how we've acted with regards to Ukraine, how we've acted with regards to this trade war. So I just think that we've weakened ourselves pretty noticeably across a variety of different metrics vis-a-vis China.
Yeah, I think the short-term winner is Europe, because China wants to keep these factories humming, so they'll have a lot of excess supply that they'll be willing to sell at a discounted rate. And I think the EU is about to get a massive amount kind of for sale on a ton of products. The medium and the long-term winner, I actually think, I agree with you, is China. I know firsthand their commerce executives and business people are roaming around Europe and Latin America saying, hey, you may not like us, but you can trust us. We do what we say we're going to do. And I was actually at dinner with the CEO of one of the largest companies in China, and he said, yeah, for the first time, we're talking to European companies about providing cloud services. And the general reaction was always, we don't trust China to store our data in the Chinese cloud. And now the question is, okay, we don't trust you, but we don't necessarily trust American companies now either. So this is not only
Elon Musk Starlink. Like they're like, are we going to trust Elon Musk with the internet access? I think that there are going to be some countries that are going to look at that both ways now. Some will want to do that deal because they feel like it might be a way to get good favor with the Trump administration, but I think others are going to feel about that the way they might have felt about China a couple of years ago.
We also have to do a better job as Democrats. I think of like, who has been good at pushing back on autocrats. And I learned this. I did an interview with Anne Applebaum, and she said, if you take Alexander Navalny as an example of someone who was able to push back on an emerging kleptocracy or an autocrat, it was because he was able to connect it to people's lives, that he had this sort of motto when he was running against Putin that, okay, they're getting rich and there's still potholes in Moscow. And Elizabeth Warren, or Senator Warren, kind of summarized it nicely by saying, they're getting rich and you're getting your health care taken away. And I don't think we've done a really good job of explaining to the American people that a kleptocracy creates a small number of very rich people, whether it's the people who are tipped off to the launch of the Trump coin the Friday night before inauguration, small number of wallets, like 30 wallets, made $800 million, thing spikes, they dump the bag, and then over the course of the next several weeks, 800,000 smaller investors lost billions. And we haven't done a good enough job connecting that, okay, when Elon Musk, as part of our negotiation with UK around tariffs, gets a Starlink deal, that means every other American tech company, every other small business, and by the way, 98% of the companies that make their living from importing and exporting in the United States are small and medium-sized businesses who create 2/3 of the jobs in America, but don't have lobbyists, and they don't have enough money to get on Trump's lunch calendar or be part of Eric's executive, like, $500,000 a year kind of fraternity, if you will. Those are the people that get hurt the most. And I don't think we as Democrats have done a good enough job connecting the dots there, or that say, look, kleptocracy is a small tax and then a medium tax on everyone, such that we can funnel a massive amount of money to a small number of people. All right, let's move on here.
To the
we'll
music
take one quick
segment?
break. Stay with us.
Support for the show comes from Shopify. It's no small thing to start a business. I remember when I was starting out, and could use Shopify, could use some infrastructure, could use some help. Anyways,
Okay, we're just gonna have to figure out.
Welcome back. On the immigration front, a federal judge has blocked.
Gamer girl with no feet would be even more goated. What was that? Wasn't there a fucking was this actually a hentai game, or did people just say that? Kataru Shouju? What am I thinking of? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Katawa Shouju? Is that what it was called? Did I actually get that? Or are you making fun of how I pronounce it? Katawa Shouju. Oh my god. It's because I was a huge fan of that game, okay. Was that game actually like a hentai visual novel, or did people just end up drawing a bunch of like porn about it?
What may be one of the Trump administration's most extreme efforts yet, the planned deportation of detainees to Libya. ISIS detained Asian nationals in Texas and allegedly pressured them to voluntarily agree to be transferred to prisons controlled by armed militia in eastern Libya, despite widespread reports of torture and human rights abuses in those facilities. At the same time, Trump is touting a 95% drop in illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border compared to last year. Tim, is this a fear tactic designed to intimidate future migrants into staying away or self-deporting? What do you think is going on here?
There definitely is a desire to try to intimidate people into self-deporting, and they're actively doing this. They're running ads calling on people to self-deport right now throughout the country. So there's
Kinda
that.
weird.
I think there is a little bit of a sadism to the Stephen Miller wing of the Trump administration. I think some of them like the idea of doing these kind of outlandish types of deportation plans because A, it's intimidating. B, I think they get some kind of pleasure out of it, maybe erotic pleasure, I don't know, but it's hard to keep track of all the stuff. But the Libya thing is the latest. There's another story I guess a week or two ago, of a guy, Omar Amin, who got deported to Rwanda. He was from Iraq and had been pretty thinly, and I think quite clearly falsely, accused of being part of ISIS when he was in Iraq. He'd then come to America, brought his whole family here, went through the refugee vetting process, was living in Sacramento, was working, did not have any crimes in America, but he was accused. There was some cable where he's on a list of people that were ISIS members. Him and his lawyer says that's false. Anyway, he gets jailed during the first Trump administration. Has been jailed since then, and we just sent him to Rwanda, where he's not from. And we have there's another situation I was just reading this morning in New York with these two guys who are 19 and 20, graduated high school. Were from El Salvador. Their parents brought them here when they were kids. They hadn't broken any laws, were good students, spoke English, and they went to their immigration checkup, but they ended up getting shackled, sent to Louisiana, and now are about to be sent back to El Salvador, where they don't remember or know anybody in El Salvador. So like all of this, is part of the broader effort to, yes, intimidate, and to send a signal to the world that people aren't welcome here anymore. And that's what they want, right? I mean, the only people they're going to welcome into this country are white Afrikaners from South Africa. I don't think you've got to,
You see, we got our first 43 Afrikaners here in the poor refugees from South Africa. My disposition is that the South African white genocide shit is all fake, but that's just because the people who promoted it were people that I didn't trust at all when it came to reporting on racial issues. So it might actually be a big deal, and I'm just biased. I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. It could be that maybe there is some really fucked shit going on there, but I feel like there was a day or two that I spent trying to dig through it where people were saying that people were the victims of like racial killings, like black people were trying to get vengeance on white people kill them, and then I feel like when I looked into it, they just look like robberies. But then other people were saying, well, no, they're targeted robberies of white people, and it's like maybe, I don't know.
Read between the lines too much on that, and it's outrageous. And I think that part of the stuff, to your point, the last thing about Democrats, I think that the more Democrats can just speak, whether it's about the economy or whether it's about this stuff, in normal language and focus on things that people understand. People really don't want kids that were brought here when they were 4 to be sent back to El Salvador. Like, that is not a popular policy. They don't want people to be grabbed off the street by masked agents and sent to a prison camp in El Salvador or a prison camp in Libya. Like, those are not popular things. And I think that you can talk about those things in regular language that speak to American values while also not going down crazy lefty open borders like territory. And I think that it's important to be able to do both.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. The first is this is still his most popular policy. And there's just no getting around it. I feel like a lot of this was the Democrats sticking their chin out and just waiting to get tagged hard. 250,000 people crossed the border in December of 23. We were just sort of asking for it. And then they see, okay, them getting Trump, or Biden-Harris hats and free phone cards and hotel rooms, and Americans saying, okay, there's something wrong here. But I've never understood about this whole argument, or where I feel Americans fail to see what's going on, is that immigration is obviously the secret sauce of America, but I've always thought, I'm kind of where Friedman was on this, and that is the most profitable part of immigration is illegal immigration. Because they're essentially the most flexible and inexpensive workforce in history. When there's crops to be picked or old people to be taken care of or dishes to be washed, and we can't afford or find domestic workers, the reason why it's fairly inexpensive to eat out is because of illegal immigration. Some cities, somewhere between 15-25% of fast food workers are undocumented workers. And in addition, they generate a surplus of $100 billion in the Social Security program because most of them are younger and they don't stick around for Social Security. They pay their taxes and then they go back. A mass deportation effort, some estimates put at 4 to 7% loss or reduction in GDP.
I kind of bring this up every now and then, but it feels like a lost cause because it's so anti-intuitive or unintuitive. And I know that when I bring it up, I'm literally the only time in a lot of people's lives that they have ever heard this argument given ever. So it just feels like I'm doing like some libcuck apologia. But illegal immigrants are a fiscal boon to the United States. Fiscal meaning when it comes to state or government budgets. They have a propensity to not consume too much healthcare or other types of welfare programs because you have to fake a lot of documentation to get there, and it's just very hard to collect any of those programs. But if you do steal a Social Security number or steal some kind of like welfare number, it's easy to just collect a legit paycheck and pay taxes into that system. But it's hard to get money out of it. Cato Institute, I think, does the most research on this, but most research, I've never seen anything that contradicts this. Illegal immigrants tend to be quite the fiscal boon, and then if you don't like them or if they get caught with a crime, you don't just like kick them out. So it's like very, very easy, very good in a sadistic sense, kind of for your budgets, but nobody is.
And also, they're 90% of the undocumented population is working age. About a third of agricultural workers, a quarter of ground maintenance workers, and about a quarter of all food service workers are undocumented. So, I mean, your prices are going to go up, folks. And there's this trope, and there are some very bad people. I do not believe in open borders. I believe you have to have a country. The question I would have for you, because I don't feel as if I'm very knowledgeable, I have deep domain expertise around immigration, is that we want to demonize immigrants. But wouldn't the fastest way to solve this problem be to go to the demand side, and that is say to Chipotle or lawn care companies, we're doing random audits, and based on the percentage of people who are clearly undocumented, we're going to find you $10,000 a day. Because they don't come here to rape to rape. These immigrants don't come here to commit crimes or to start gang warfare. They come here for jobs. And if you went on the demand side and basically hit those nice American people with real fines, such that they started implementing, and they could do this with biometrics or just simple documentation verification. If there's no jobs, if it's like, okay, I'm sorry, I can't hire you, they melt back to where they came from. But we don't want to do that, do we?
No. Yeah, two thoughts on this. One is, and I think that it reveals a lot about why they're targeting, who they're targeting, what the motivations are. This administration doesn't want to go after business owners directly, right? I mean, if they get hurt by the tariffs because Trump's obsessed with tariffs, that's one thing, but they're not trying to make enemies of people that they think voted for them or possibly voted for them, small business owners. Plus, on top of that, Donald Trump is an employer of illegal immigrants who worked at, his hotels and golf courses, which he knows. So they don't have any interest in doing that. You're exactly right. They could. There's e-verification. I mean, this has been something that like border hawks, immigration hawks have been proposing ever since I've been in politics. In fact, many of the candidates I worked for supported that as it was something that's on your policy agenda in the campaign, but then you don't actually put into place in government e-verify because you don't want to actually punish the small business owners that are likely Republican voters. So what they're doing now is they feel like low risk, right? Like who, there are probably some working class Hispanic voters that moved over to Trump that are starting to have maybe a change of heart because they had a cousin or a friend or something who is not a criminal, who's been deported, or they know somebody who has. So there's maybe a little bit of a risk there. But broadly speaking, if you take an 18 and 19-year-old El Salvador, kid that was brought here that can't vote, was brought here illegally by their parents, and you send them back.
You can argue against the right about illegal immigrants. They say, oh, you like slave labor, that's why you want them here. I mean, if they buy into that premise, then you can very easily. The thing is to just get people off of the dumb arguments. Like conservatives will try to do this thing where they're like, oh, well, we don't like them because they're fiscal trans. Like, bullshit. That's nothing to do with any of this. You don't stop. When will conservatives lose the right in U.S. politics? When will they lose the right to complain about the budget? Like conservatives have underperformed Democrats on fiscal stuff for like the last 30 years, since a lot of people here have even been alive. Can we stop giving conservatives credit about giving a fuck about the budget or about the government spending or anything? Because you clearly don't give a fuck, or it doesn't show ever.
Back to El Salvador. You're not paying a political price for that in any meaningful way, and it is immoral. It's an affront to what the country is supposed to be about, and it's an affront to the very American ethos of people wanting to come here and have an opportunity, but you're not paying a political price there. There's obviously some racial elements to it, as referenced earlier with the white Afrikaners, but it's also just they feel like it's much more politically palatable to go after 18 and 19-year-old kids that would have been dreamers or whatever than it is to go after American business owners. And just one really quick thing on the economy. I agree. This all takes time. Like this is going to happen now. But just adding on to what we talked about earlier with tariffs. Okay, you add onto that, we're deporting a bunch of people that are working, doing cheap work. We're not bringing in nearly as many people as we were. So the shutting down of the border is good in that it's shutting down some of the fentanyl traffic and some of the gang labor, but it's also shutting down people that are coming here to work. And then on top of that, we're firing a lot of people in the federal workforce. We're putting them on the sidelines. They're probably going to end up getting paid anyway, so we're going to be paying them to do nothing while that goes to the courts. And it's harder for recent college grads to get jobs, in a lot of these areas because people don't know what's going to be happening with the government. I just think that there are a lot of economic factors there that are.
What does the budget have to do with slave labor? Well, nothing, but conservatives don't give a fuck about slave labor. They don't care about any of these moral issues for immigrants. It's some other shit that they care about. That's it. But get them off the weird budget talk because they clearly don't give a fuck about it, and then have a more honest conversation.
Pointing to a pretty bad situation, once it all, starts to hum through the economy.
Let me put forward a thesis and I want to get your response to it. So I have a 17-year-old son, and there's been reports and verification of actual people who aren't criminals, people who were brought here, grew up here, being deported, some ending up in these hellscapes prisons. And also reports of U.S. citizens. And my view is, unfortunately, that a lot of Democrats who are very wealthy clutch their pearls and say at dinner parties how outraged they are. But they don't really do a fucking thing about it. Because there's this emerging what I'll call transnational oligarchy, the togarchs. And that's, if you're in the 1%, you have a disproportionate amount of power. And without you, it's very hard to get anything done without your support. And so it's easy to complain about it at dinner parties. But the reality is in America that your rights have become a function of your wealth. My kid is not going to be sequestered by ICE and sent to El Salvador. There's just zero chance that could happen. I will not be silenced because I have the money to lawyer up. Anyone in my life that becomes pregnant, I don't care if I'm in deepest, reddest Mississippi, I can get access to family planning because I have money. And if shit really gets real, and on the, quite frankly, just the unlikely chance we start rounding up Jews and I get on the wrong list, well before that, I have the money to peace out to Milan or Dubai.
Yep.
And what that creates is this lack of incentive or this divesting of the most powerful's interest in America. And that is, whereas before, I think the really wealthy thought, I'm going to stay here. If this could happen to them, it could happen to us. But now there's a feeling amongst me, well, I was turning this back to me, but among the real...
I really liked the, somebody made a tweet. Do I like it, or is it just sad? Does anybody have a link to somebody just made a tweet, and it was like, the year is 2014. Barack Obama accepts a $500 million plane from some country. He tells you that he absolutely won't use this or it's not going to influence his opinions or foreign policy. And it's just like, even just like reading it, like I can already see the conservative brains exploding. like just reading that tweet and imagining what it would have been like. Was it the Onion guy that the Onion tweet? Fuck. Is his name Tim Onion? Somebody just typed that in. Oh. Oh, maybe it was on a blue sky. But it's 2015. President Barack Obama has accepted a Sky Palace jumbo jet from the Qatari government, which he'll own after he leaves office. Everybody relax, he says in an interview with the New York Times. Everyone does. The networks then televised the military parade in his honor on his birthday. It's just like... I still need to find out if Trump can actually keep this jet.
Happen to them, it could
I
happen
still don't
to
know the answer to that.
us. But now there's a feeling amongst me, well, I was turning this back to me, but among the really wealthy, they were insulated from some of this, that it really doesn't impact us. So we have our own schools, we have our own security, we have our own healthcare, we have our own legal rights. We're protected by the law, but we're not bound by it. And it creates this really unhealthy ecosystem where the most powerful in our nation, even who claim to have progressive values, really don't feel that same sense of vested interests in the maintenance and fidelity to American values. Because at the end of the day, we're kind of global citizens, and our governance is the dollar. We're basically how much money we have, and we can find those rights somewhere else, even if they're violated here. Your thoughts?
I think that there's some of that. Look, you always going to paint with a broad brush in these sort of situations. Like there are certainly rich liberals that are out there doing what they can, and others that are, feel like how you did. And I hear from Bulwark listeners, like upper middle class people, that have come up to me and say that they're thinking of leaving. Like I had a woman just over the weekend that was like, "I'm thinking about moving to Australia. My
Wait.
husband is a citizen or something," and I was like, "Don't leave. I'm not going anywhere. You're fine here. You actually, because of what you just laid out, Scott, like if you're a citizen of this country that has enough money for a lawyer, like you're in pretty good shape right now. We'll see how things look when Donald Trump is deteriorating at age 81 in 2027. Maybe my assessment will change on that, but as of right now, you're fine, and you should be staying here and should be fighting." So I think there's a little bit of that. I also think the Democratic Party, and this is going to go against my policy preferences is probably, but I think that from a political standpoint, this is important. Like, the Democratic Party has not done a particularly great job of recruiting people that are from the working class, that are from the non-globalist parts of America to be spokespersons for the party. A lot of times those people are probably going to be they're probably going to have different views from me